I'm Jeff Wilson. I'm the president and CEO of Precipitate Gold Corporation. Precipitate trades on the TSX Venture on the symbol PRG and on the OTCQB at the symbol PREIF. Precipitate Gold is a junior mining and exploration company focused primarily in the Dominican Republic, but also with assets in Newfoundland. And the company is focused on new discoveries and finding what could be world-class discoveries for major mining companies.
Jeff, good to see you. Haven't seen you since September 2020. We spoke a couple times then. Good year, 2020, wasn't it? Enjoyed it.
It was a good year, yeah. Yes, it started out a little bit shaky with the COVID stuff, but it sure ramped up at the back end and was a lot of fun.
Okay, so what's happened since? Because you were 30 cents then, 10 cents now. You've come, share price obviously come off during that time. Market cap still around 10 million bucks. So what's been happening?
Yeah, so we've stayed positioned with our assets in the Dominican Republic. We really believe that we've got key assets there. They're owned 100%. No underlying payments, no underlying work commitments in very strategic locations in the country, has been evidenced by some news that's come out recently. And in the midst of sort of some political uncertainty and some bureaucracy in the Dominican Republic that sort of created a little bit of uncertainty in terms of certain other companies and some of our neighbors' ability to get things done, we thought it would make sense to diversify a little bit. And in mid to late 2021, we picked up a couple of assets in Newfoundland. Two assets there, one that's seen some prior work and has some interesting prior drill intercepts and showings, and another one that's a little bit more grassroots, but in what we believe to be quite prospective geology. So it's kind of given us a balanced portfolio here, and we're positioned to sort of push on.
Right. So let's talk about the Dominican Republic, all right? Because obviously some good news, bad news time, I think, it feels like. So let's talk about the good news. We'll start with the positives, right? So Barrick, you've done a deal, you got some money in. Tell us all about that, first of all.
Yeah, so we picked up ground surrounding one of the largest gold mines in the world. That's Barrick's Pueblo Viejo in the Dominican Republic. We saw an opportunity there to essentially surround Barrick's mining operation on three sides. We picked up that ground for what at the time was $25,000 cash Canadian and some shares of Precipitate that were escrowed. About a year after that, and after spending about $350,000 doing our own exploration and trying to get some targets there to a drill stage, we entered into discussions with Barrick on an earn-in agreement, essentially a joint venture where Barrick agreed to spend up to $10 million US over 6 years and provide or produce a pre-feasibility study in exchange for 70% of the asset. So that has progressed along nicely. Barrick spent about $2.5 million to date. But in recent months, Barrick came to us and indicated that aside from the exploration potential, they saw some value in some of the ground that we held. And we started talking about a possible transaction there to amend our earn-in to extract a couple of small portions of our project that they're earning on in exchange for cash. So what that got us was $5 million US, which the US dollar has been performing quite nicely recently. So that equates to about 6.4 million Canadian in non-dilutive cash in our treasury, and a 3% NSR on the ground that they've extracted as a bit of a defense mechanism for us as well. And as an added couple of bonuses there, they're going to do condemnation drilling on those sort of postage stamps that they're acquiring. If the condemnation drilling intersects any meaningful mineralization that Barrick deems extractable, they will put that ground back into the earn-in, and we get to keep our $5 million, which is quite a nice benefit for us. And if they ever, in the next 10 years, wish to relinquish any of these ground, they get a right to back. So it's an opportunity for us to divest of a couple of small pieces of ground that have seen extensive prior drilling. I mean, there's been over 119 holes in these areas. We know that there's not much in the way of meaningful mineralization. And it's our belief that Barrick will utilize this stuff for infrastructure rather than any kind of extraction.
Well, there's the key bit, right? There's the key bit to this, because I'm so fascinated by the kind of the strategies that juniors employ. You said we're going to wrap ourselves around, their pit, Pueblo Viejo. Not necessarily because you thought you'd find a lot going on there, or did you actually think there was a chance of finding mineralization of a decent enough quality to run your own operation? Was this always about how do we tap into Barrick some which way, whether it be for exploration potential or for utilization of the land, which is obviously where they've ended up?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I was smart enough to have seen all of this coming, 2.5 years ago when we acquired the ground. I mean, I think that as a junior exploration company, and a junior exploration CEO, you always have sort of rose-colored glasses a little bit, and you believe that there's prospective ground that can be acquired, and there certainly are still pieces of ground here on this project. I don't want to undermine the fact that some of this has been extracted. The majority of the Pueblo Grande project, our project, remains part of the earn-in with Barrick. There are a number of targets that they will continue to test in the months and hopefully years ahead. But as it turned out, there were some circumstances, again, that we really couldn't have foreseen that worked in our favor in the last couple of years. And, I guess maybe you've got to be smart to be lucky, as they say. And we had some pieces of ground that were of use and of value to Barrick, and we're able to structure a transaction that I think is very beneficial for shareholders.
Okay, so infrastructure, tailings, whatever it is that they're going to utilize this land for, $5 million US, rounding error for those guys. But for you, what are you going to go do with the money? Because this is meaningful to you. I'm not quite sure what your current cash position was before this deal and when you actually received this cash.
Yeah, so we received the cash from Barrick on the day the transaction closed. It was another very interesting part of the transaction. Really, Barrick took on all of the risk. So essentially, we were going to relinquish these pieces of ground for them to pick up, and instantaneously a wire transfer, that money hit our bank account on the day we news released it. So the money's there. What are we going to do with the money? We had
so what's that in total? What's that in total? $2 million. Okay, sorry, you're going to get that. $2 million plus 5.
So that's a 6 million. Well, 5 million is in US is about 6.5 Canadian, and we have 2 preceding that. So we're about $8.5 million Canadian in the treasury.
Yeah.
Some of which is flow through money, which will be earmarked for Newfoundland, which I assume we'll talk about in a little bit. The balance of that really, sort of the world's our oyster a little bit here. I mean, on the one hand, our remaining projects in the Dominican Republic, first of all, Barrick will continue on Pueblo Grande, so they'll continue to spend there. Our other 2 assets, Ponton and Juan de Herrera, are both drill ready. We have a number of targets on both of those projects. We have drill permits on both of those projects. And so we're, poised and positioned to deploy money in the Dominican Republic on our 2 assets there. As you know,
I was about to say, subject to watch, Arthur, because obviously that's been the kind of the problem. Dominican Republic in terms of perception of the market, and Dominican Republic in terms of ability to do anything on the ground, get permits, licenses, etc. That it's difficult at the moment. So what's the chance of those projects actually moving forward, or are you 100% now focused on Newfoundland? Yeah,
I mean, I wouldn't say we're 100% focused. I think Newfoundland has a chance to be sort of an early mover here in terms of our news flow and results and exploration. But the Dominican Republic, look, I think that this what one has to keep in mind is that Barrick's Pueblo Viejo, where we just did this transaction with Barrick, that is the single largest contributor to the Dominican Republic's economy. So it's not as if mining is this out of favor, disliked business. This is the most important business in the Dominican Republic, and they recognize that. But like any part of the world, whether you want to, drill or exploit in the Dominican Republic, or you want to build a pipeline in Canada, these major projects run into opposition, and you have to work through these issues. And so that's what's happening in the DR. I don't believe that it's a government that doesn't want mining. It's a government that wants to make sure that the people of its country understand the benefits of mining, and that mining can be done in a responsible manner. So I think what we're waiting on here a little bit is our other project, our Juan de Herrera project, is adjacent to an existing 3.5 million ounce gold equivalent deposit owned and operated by Gold Quest. That project of Gold Quest has been in limbo for some time, awaiting an exploitation permit to go through the development process, to take it from exploration to exploitation. And that's been stalled. And it's been stalled not so much by the government, but by local business leaders and, the church to some extent and others. Now, that's evolved really quite well in recent months. And I think that they've put a lot of those opponents kind of at ease with the realization that, look, we're going to do all the necessary environmental impact studies, et cetera. But to answer your question in terms of what will we do with the money and the DR, I think that will be a catalyst for us. I think that Romero receiving that permit would signify at the very least to the investment community that if you find it, you can exploit it, and you can extract it. And for us to spend money exploring when the guys next door can't get it out of the ground, you're not going to get credit for that exploration success. What we need is a pathway to production, and that gives us the green light to go after finding more. So that's kind of our mentality on that. We're sitting tight. We're hoping that permit for Gold Quest comes soonish, but in the meantime, we've got other places to continue to work and move the needle forward.
Okay, so it's kind of an interesting topic at the moment. So it's sort of dwell on this one a bit, but the social license component. Obviously, Gold Quest has been sitting waiting for how long? Years, right?
Been over 5 years. Yeah.
Over 5 years, right? It's taken a long time for them to get there, and I think this is a dawning realization from miners that you need to pay attention to the little guys, and sort of local. The social licensing is real. We've been hearing about it for the past few months, but there's still people who don't necessarily believe that. You're not necessarily at that point yourself, but at some point you're going to have to kind of step up and say, okay, with our one eye on this project, we're focusing. We're going to look at Newfoundland, but we'll probably encounter some similar issues up there, so maybe. But with our one eye down here in Dominican Republic, I mean, are you geared up? Do you have the skill sets on board to have those conversations? What's to say that you won't encounter the same problems?
Yeah, no, definitely that is a potential problem. I think that regardless of the amount of work that we're doing in terms of exploration or news flow or these kinds of things, I think one of the things that people may or may not recognize is that even during slow news times and exploration times, I'm spending a significant amount of time talking to my contacts in the Dominican Republic, people in government, people in the business community, local politicians, to try to indicate, what is it that we need to do to position ourselves to be welcomed versus, not welcome. And so it's an ongoing process of trying to position ourselves to be the company that locals will want to do business with and to see the benefit of us being there. Although you have some opposition that has a loud voice, that might be a local business leader or a local mayor or someone like that. I mean, for the most part, the local communities are looking at jobs. They're looking at the economic benefit for the individual and for the individual's family. That's what really matters to most people. And I think that's where we have an opportunity to educate during our time down there in the times when we're not working. And quite frankly, I think it's important to not be rushing to be working, because I think people in any culture recognize when you're just talking to them because you've got an agenda to sort of get over. And hey, we're going to be nice to you today because we want to go drilling tomorrow. I think what you need to do is you need to communicate with these people, even when you've sort of put your equipment away and you're just sitting down to try to really understand their needs. And that's kind of the way that we've been positioning this. So, having assets in another jurisdiction such as Newfoundland allows us to make sure that our shareholders aren't completely on hold with no potential upside while we work through these, local issues in the Dominican Republic. But we need to also evidence to the locals in the DR that, we're genuine and that our interests are aligned with everybody in these communities.
Right. Okay. So you're going to go through that the right way. But for your current shareholders, you're stating loudly, say, right, Dominican Republic, it's not on hold. It's going to move slowly, but it's going to move the right way. We're going to have the right discussions, and we may be able to release some value at some point down the future. So today, where you should be valuing us at $10 million by the looks of it, is Newfoundland and what we've got there, plus obviously cash in the bank at $8.5 million on a market cap of $10 million. Yes. People haven't quite got the story yet, Jeff. So let's talk about Newfoundland. The reason I want to understand this is because look, I always say this, mining's tough, right? Every day there's problems, and it's a case of risk mitigation every goddamn day. That's your job, right? But me as a shareholder, I'm like, I don't care. Don't make your problems my problems. I want a growth story. I want you to create value for me, and I want the shares to go up in price. But you jumped up to Newfoundland. So you've got a delicate dance to do here, because we saw this last year. Lots of companies jumping on the bandwagon of newfound gold and Marathon, etc. You've got to, and some of those, and we interviewed some of those companies. Some of them will never ever do anything, but it was jumping on the bandwagon. You, with your track record, and you with obviously more recently with what's going on down in Dominican Republic, you've got to deliver something real here. There's got to be some real strong fundamentals here. So what have you got? What are you going to do?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point, and it's a point that I was, somewhat reluctant, quite frankly, initially to go into Newfoundland because I didn't want to be perceived to have, sort of chasing the new trend and the hot, area play. And so if somebody takes, and we will here, if someone takes 10 seconds to let me speak about Newfoundland, they'll realize that we're not sort of trying to, bolt ourselves onto this area play and yet be actually too far out of the right rocks to even really be relevant. What we did is, my geologist has spent some time in Newfoundland in the past and previously in his career, likes the geology, had some experience in certain regions. The areas where we've acquired ground are nowhere near Newfound gold. We're not in the same geological trend. We're not in the same belt. We're not trying to be something like proximity play. We're in quite distinct regions that have their own technical merit. Our Mother Lode project has been drilled in the past. Part of the strategy there, a little bit like our, maybe not quite like the Barrick deal, but the thinking that, look, you've got to pick up a large land package. It's got to be prospective based on geology, prior work, whatever it may be. But we negotiated with 7 different property vendors to consolidate that project, one contiguous land package for the first time ever. So yeah, there was some stuff here and some sniffs there. But they're all their own little empire trying to make something out of these small little areas. We were able to consolidate all of that, wrap it all up, look at it with big airborne survey early on. We've had boots on the ground coming up here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be announcing that. And we'll really start to sort of figure some things out here and try to get this to a drill stage in the near term. And in our second project called ACE, again, a much more early stage, very little prior work, it is in the right rocks. It's had a couple of very sort of splashy grab samples historically, and we were able to pick it up for, I don't want to say a song, but, reasonable terms, sort of stock heavy versus cash. And, we'll figure out here, I think in the next 12 months, whether that's, got the right stuff to justify a drill program or we give it back to the vendors. So, our objective here, very much as you indicated, look, I can sit down and I can tell people that the stuff in the Dominican Republic is going to work out. Just be patient. Nobody buys a junior exploration stock to be patient. They buy it to have a return on investment in the near term. And you've got to be doing something that's going to move the needle. And Newfoundland gives us that, sort of near term catalyst potential. But I think the stuff in the DR gives us, projects that are in very prospective regions that, the Barrick deal proved that. And I think that when the timing's right, we'll deploy some capital back into the Dominican Republic when we feel like there's a reasonable expectation for a return on investment.
Right. I'm sorry, I got to say this. I don't think anyone's going to give you any value for anything that's going on down in Dominican Republic. You've got the cash on that you've received from Barrick. Now they want to see what you're going to do with that. So I'm all ears about Newfoundland. If you can at some later date prove the market me wrong about what being able to monetize further at Dominican Republic, that's great. That's all gravy. That's all upside. So right now, the story I want to hear is about obviously ACE is a little bit further behind here. And could you argue that's a neurology play because you do have Newfound gold somewhere close by, don't you?
Yeah, it's less about Newfound gold actually, because again, it's not the same rock type and not the same geology, but it's a postology play to what used to be Ethos is now Prospector.
Yeah,
who changed their name, and with their Too Good project, which is got some very high grade material there. And Exploits Discoveries are also proximal to
okay.
it. So there's a couple of
the comps.
High-grade projects.
Those are the comps.
Those are the comps.
Awesome, right? And just in terms, and then obviously, then with the kind of the rolling up of these land packages that you've done down at Mother Lode, that's great. Can you kind of tell us how you're going to allocate capital to each of those projects in the near term? Because I think you've got to make some quick wins in terms of headlines to the market for these impatient retail investors and existing and potential. And so, what does that look like for the rest of this year? And what's the clever, meaningful stuff that people should really be paying attention to in terms of the way that you go about trying to work out what it is that you've got. Let's start with Motherlode.
Yeah, and I'd like to finish with the fact that the Newfoundland stuff has a treasury that I'll speak about what we're going to do with it here in the short term that we had prior to the Barrick transaction. Mm-hmm. With the Barrick transaction completed, an additional $6.5 million Canadian in the bank. There's a second leg to the what other than the DR might we do, and it's acquisition, it's M&A. It's now we're a cashed up company that could potentially look at what kind of other accretive assets we might be able to bring into the company or give our shareholders exposure to, thanks to the cash in an otherwise fairly soft market. So that's another thing we're looking at.
So, but jurisdiction agnostic by the sounds of it.
Yes.
And ideally picking something which is cash constrained and has real value as opposed to having to try and unpick from a blank sheet of paper, right? So does it tell us what you're looking for?
Yeah, well, I've had actually a number already. I mean, our news release on the Barrick transaction is a week old, and I've already had a number of approaches from, people I know, people I don't know, sort of asking, so what are you going to do with this money? I think, the potential to acquire something a little bit more advanced, the potential to acquire something perhaps with the historic or known resource, and exploration potential is certainly out there. I think there's some great companies that have advanced great projects, and because of the market environment we've been in the last month or two, are just not getting that traction and could certainly benefit from an injection of capital like the kind of money we now have in the treasury, whether that's in some sort of a 1 + 1 = 3 on some sort of a merger type transaction, or if that's just a project specific. I'm looking at those things. We could also pick up, quite large land packages of earlier stage stuff and have the financial wherewithal to test targets and try to discover something ourselves. So we're kind of in this position where, when you've got money like this on a non-dilutive basis, you're sort of the pretty girl at the dance. And I think there'll be a lot of people, speaking with us to find out what we may or may not be interested in. And for us, I think what we need to do, and I'll have some conversations with the board soon, is to try to vector our focus in terms of what are we interested in, what stage project would we like, perhaps, sure, we're jurisdictionally agnostic, but where do we really want to be, and then start to focus in on what kinds of opportunities might make sense for us to spend a little bit of time looking at. I mean, I don't want to get distracted by that because we've got projects we want to advance, but I think it's a unique situation we find ourselves in thanks to a transaction that kind of came out of nowhere.
Well, but that's the thing about being the pretty girl at the dance, right? You don't necessarily end up with the right partner in the sense that you've got a near-term history with what's gone on down in the Dominican Republic, where you haven't had a chance to prove yourselves, right? And you've got picked up Newfoundland, and there's a couple of targets there, obviously in different stages where you haven't really done anything yet. And if you go sort of around looking for the next gig before having done anything, there's a point at which the market starts to judge that, are these guys, are they deal makers or are they actually doers? So you've got to be really careful. You're right. You don't want to be distracted, but you also got to be really careful that you don't get discredited for not being actually able to do proper exploration or moving projects along and completing what you start out to do. Do you know what I mean? So it's a real, delicate dance. I use that phrase again. Yeah,
no, it is. And I think, there's sort of two sides of the equation here when you find yourself with a sort of a war chest here of cash that didn't cost you any shares, so to speak. And one is, what I'm reluctant to do is to let this dwindle away, 8 million becomes 7 million, becomes 6 million, and you're sort of, going sideways, and all you're doing is just paying overhead and not really doing anything accretive to shareholders.
Right.
Right.
So tell me what you think accretive looks like, right? So you're saying potentially it might be go find another deal, or it could be do something with Motherlode or Ace. Yep. I mean, what does it look like to you? What's accretive mean to you?
Well, I think that it's going to be both of those things because in December of last year we raised a little over $2 million. 1.6 million Canadian of that was flow-through funds, which will absolutely be deployed in Canada and at the current time in Newfoundland this year. So there's no question that Newfoundland is going to see a fairly aggressive campaign of exploration. Go back to your point, for us to actually do what we said and set out to do, which is to go and spend money and test targets and find out whether or not we're as smart as we think we are about, the ground that we picked up and the potential of that ground. So that money is earmarked for Canadian exploration, and it will be spent in exploration this year. I think you'll see Mother Lode very likely drilled unless something, really goes wrong there in terms of the work that we do leading into a drill program. Ace is a bit more of a wild card, but if it justifies it, we've got the financial capacity to drill on both projects or to do a more significant size program on, the one that we deem to be the most deserving. So to answer your question, we will spend money in Newfoundland. We are going to test our thesis in terms of whether or not we can identify projects that deliver in terms of exploration and discovery. At the same time, we'll still have the remainder of our treasury to deploy as we see fit, whether that's sort of sitting and waiting for the DR or, if the timing is right and the circumstances are right, spending in the DR. That could certainly be part of the go forward plan. Or if something else emerges in the interim that we think, can add value to shareholders, then, at a price that makes sense, then we would look at something like that. Again, I wouldn't want to acquire something where the acquisition was handing over a bunch of our money to an outgoing owner. I would want it to be something whereby they get in the boat with us on a share and an equity position, and then we've got our money to be able to spend on assets rather than putting it in somebody else's pocket. So it's a delicate dance a little bit to sort of make these deals worthwhile for us. I would say right now we're in a buyer's market. So if we see something we like, we would structure it in a way that made sense to us. But these are things that, we're not in a rush to jump into anything else. We've got assets, we've got a portfolio we like. So again, it has to be something that we think is, net beneficial to Precipitate shareholders for us to go after and acquire.
Okay, you're not going to be casual with your money. You're going to be smart. Think about it. Okay, is the same team together, or any people coming in, going out from last time we spoke?
No, we've got the same team. I mean, the one unfortunate sort of change is that our good friend Quentin Henning had to step down from the board when he took on the Crescat role. So Quentin is still a very good friend of mine and an ally for us, and I speak to him quite frequently. But he resigned from the board back last August, and we haven't added to that to this point. So the rest of the team's all still in place.
Okay. Well, Jeff, I guess it's a case of we'll step back, see what you do. So reminding me again, what are the kind of near-term things that you're going to be delivering on, say, the next 6 months, end of the year? Yeah,
so most of the focus in the near term is definitely going to be Newfoundland. You're going to see here in the weeks ahead, we are going to initiate boots on the ground. We're going to have, crews out there doing, prospecting, sampling, mapping, going to some of the areas that we really liked on maps and spending some time there with boots on the ground. Sort of ground truthing, if you will, some of these prospects that look to be the most interesting to us. Upon completion of that, it looks like we'll do ground geophysics. We'll do some IP over what look to be the best areas and utilize that geophysical data, that IP information for drill targeting. We've got drill contractors sort of softly lined up already, because that's a big deal in Newfoundland, is getting people and getting personnel and getting contracts. We've sort of got that stuff arranged. So my hope is a sequence of news releases over the course of the coming months that all leads into, drilling. And in the interim, Barrick will continue to work on the balance of the Pueblo Grande project, which is still a significantly large land package. There's still a number of targets there. Any results that come from their work, of course, will be disclosed. And we'll sort of, have our fingers crossed here that our friends at Gold Quest and the Dominican government provide some sort of a catalyst here in the form of a permit for Gold Quest that I think would evidence it's game on again for our Wanda Herrera. So that's a bit of a wild card, but it's a very interesting project. It's got a number of targets. It's drill ready. It's drill permitted, and I think, quite frankly, I think if Gold Quest were to get that permit, you might see some mid-tier and maybe even majors, but certainly mid-tier companies starting to look at that district as as sort of an emerging district that may have some potential for some sort of takeover or acquisition as well. And we'd be well positioned to be part of that if that were to happen.